gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Mondays Down South. As you can see, we are bare in the cupboard today. Went from 4 last week to 2 this week. Hopefully, it doesn't affect our views as much. From Evan's analysis, it seems like we get way more viewers. We have multiple people, so I guess that's on me with my social media side. So you heard it here first. This week, we will get on Instagram, and you can cut this clip and make sure I put it up there, Ev, whenever it's done. With that being said, I think we can just get right to it. E, you want to touch on anything right off the back? Any updates for the viewers before we get deep dive into NFL? I mean, we're going to talk about NFL plenty, but since it's just you and me, we're allowed to talk about other sports today, my friend.
I know. Unfortunately, of all the days to talk about other sports, there's not a ton. Well, I mean, at least baseball, obviously, there's literally nothing to talk about because nothing can happen right now. But obviously, I got to give a shout out to the JMU Dukes. First time beating UVA in basketball all time about 20 minutes ago. Not necessarily a massive upset. We were only 5.5-point dogs because UVA is pretty bad this year, but just a huge win for the school. First season in a new arena too, got to storm the court. So shout out to the Dukes and making their usual FCS playoff run. Big game on ESPN2 on Friday night. So just a college shout out there. Otherwise, like I said, not too much sports wise. Obviously we can talk about, any other baseball topics you got in your mind, maybe a little college football playoff, although, I don't know. What else you got?
I think that's worth touching on. First and foremost, congratulations to your JMU Dukes. Shout out to Alex Wynn, Adam Wilson, and any of our other UVA UVA and Hokie fans. UVA won for being willing to play James Madison and losing. Hokies too, like Evan mentioned earlier, for not even being willing to play James Madison.
Yeah, they'll never schedule. They won't even let us come there in any sport, So to your point, shout out UVA for coming. Shout out UVA.
Y'all beat them like 10 years ago. They're just too scared, I guess. And we can say this because Zach isn't on and he has no way to defend him. So we're picking a good time. I also want to give a shout out to the boy that gave me this office sweatshirt, Manhas Nara. We are playing the UNC Tar Heels in a bowl game on December 30th. And I know for a lot of people, that's not really big news. It's 2 6-win teams. It's not something, that I should probably be getting too excited about, but I'm excited because there's the fact that we, made a bowl game, I'm very excited about. UNC obviously underperformed, which gives us an opportunity to play them. And I think if we can pull that off, having a winning season in Beamer's first year would be a very, very, very exciting outcome. We didn't even expect to make a bowl, much less win one. So I would very much enjoy that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as 2 quick feelers to our respective colleges. Other thing
should be a good one.
What was that?
Should be a good one. Zach's got a local one too, playing Maryland, right? So I was laughing too. So you guys are playing in Charlotte, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Hokies are playing in New York. Now, obviously, I have no interest in watching Virginia Tech play Maryland in the freezing cold December weather here, but I thought it was kind of funny where those games are.
I think it's funny, but I just think it just depends on conference seeding, right? Like technically, I think UVA or UNC was a bit better than Virginia Tech in terms of final seeding, if I remember correctly. So what usually ends up happening is the higher tier ACC plays like more like middle SEC just based off how rankings go. And it also makes sense because do not be surprised when you look in Charlotte and like more than half the fans are South Carolina fans because Charlotte's
even closer to there. Yeah.
It's only an hour and a half from us. It's only an hour and a half, 2 hours from Raleigh. So there's going to be or Durham. So there's going to be quite the representation from both sides, which is also why I love it because it's such a neutral site. But anyway, I'll talk about that game when it comes around. For now, I wanted to also bring up college football playoffs since we're on the topic of college football. So it's looking like we're going to get Bama number 1 seed. Glad we didn't bet on them. I was late to respond. Worked out well for us. We got Georgia at the 2. No, sorry, Michigan at the 2.
Georgia's 3.
Georgia's 3 and Cincinnati's 4, right?
Yep.
What do you feel about that? How do you feel about the 4 that made it? How do you feel about the way the 4 were seeded? And how do you feel? Do you feel like anyone got snubbed?
No, if Oklahoma State had won that game, then it would have been an incredibly hard decision between them and Cincinnati. I think they got the 4 right, especially considering Okie State lost that. Notre Dame would be the only other team that could make an argument, but since they had, it worked out brilliantly for the committee this year because they had a head-to-head at home against Cincinnati and lost. So that eliminates any of their argument. The only thing I guess would be the seeding between Alabama and Michigan. when you stack resumes, I think they got it right, but it's just with how Alabama was playing down the stretch. And I actually, right before this, just on some of the post game from the JMU game, they were talking about the committee, and the guy said a line. I forget it word for word. He was like, but like, when Alabama flexes, we all have amnesia, because they were really reeling going into that game. They were winning, but not impressively by any means. Like, if you were doing eye tests, they probably weren't even in the top 4. So like, it makes it tough with them in Michigan. Like, Michigan's been looking great towards the end of the season, and they also, dominated obviously a much lesser opponent. So it's tough. I think ultimately they got it right. But I can see a tough, 1 versus 2, Michigan having an argument to get 1.
Well, timing is always everything, right? Because if the SEC championship wasn't Alabama versus Georgia, we could also be arguing right now that Georgia should be 1. I mean, before the SEC championship, I think everyone undisputedly was like Georgia's best team in college football, even after Michigan had beaten Ohio State and had the big wins. So it's just timing's everything. I think they got it right just because, I mean, not to be SEC biased, but I just think Georgia's only lost 1 game to Bama. If anything, it's the timing, because otherwise you could even argue Georgia should be higher than Michigan, and even maybe higher than Bama, even but you can't, because they lost to them just now, right? So the 3, I didn't really care how they put those 3. I would have been fine with all of them. My only thing I will say is, obviously the Ohio State win was big, but I'm a little bit wary of the state of the Big Ten, in the sense of I think Michigan State, Ohio State, those kinds of teams were hard for me to understand this year, just based off strength of schedule and stuff. I just think the more wins against more ranked teams is probably what did it. And then Michigan winning big against Ohio, or winning by multiple scores against Ohio State, and then beating Iowa by multiple scores, or like by just straight up dominating Iowa, and then having Georgia lose is what put Michigan at 2. So for me, 2 things. 1, I think the 4 that made it makes complete sense, because in my opinion, this is the least like controversial 4 that I've seen in a long time. I'm really glad Cincinnati got the nod. They deserved it based off the way situations worked out. But compared to previous years where we had to kind of make the argument of who should be in, who shouldn't, this year was, I think, about as straightforward as it could have been, without, of course other people will argue differently, but I just think based off what you said with Notre Dame's head to head and everything like that. But then the other thing that I wanted to say was, I think Alabama versus Cincinnati is the matchup I wanted, though. Like, I really wanted to see, that's what I wanted to see more than anything, because I think Michigan Cincinnati would have been less exciting, and I didn't want to watch Bama Georgia back-to-back weeks. Like, that would have just been like, which I hate. That shouldn't be an argument for why they did it that way, but I'm happy it happened that way. You know what I mean?
Well, that was going to be part of my point too. Is it's like, if you know that you're putting Georgia ahead of Cincinnati, then you're probably also like, all right, well, you can't, like you said, you can't have a rematch of that. Now, granted, as we've seen in prior years, it'll probably just be a rematch in the 1 game later, potentially. Although neither of these games, I think, are guarantees by any means. But
I don't think it should be a lot. I mean,
no, it's not. But like, there's a good chance you're going to see it anyway. But I think to put a rematch back to back and schedule it like that is not something they would want to do. So I think that factors into it as.
This is a win-win for Cincinnati, in my opinion, because even if they end up, losing by a large margin, they lost Alabama and they made the college football playoff. I can't fault them for that. This is going to be a really bad look on Michigan if they get like pummeled, though. Like, because after everything, and with Harbaugh getting into that 4 and them riding the high, it's like, this is your representation. Like, Ohio State's been there almost every single year. This is your chance to go out there. Granted, Ohio State's lost, but at least they've like held their own, and they got to the national championship last year, right? If I remember correctly, with the
they won the first one, didn't they? Which as a like
no, yeah, they beat Clemson, pretty
in the first college football playoff. Yeah, I forget who it was, but yeah.
And then they they won the first
a long time ago.
I'm saying last year with Fields,
right.
They got to the finals after beating Clemson and lost to Bama, which is understandable because their running back was out and Najee balled out. But on the flip side, and Devontae Smith. But on the flip side of that, what I'm saying is if Michigan goes there and puts up a dud, I don't know that that's going to be a really bad look on the Big Ten, in my opinion, because it's like they did all that to get there. They exceeded expectations. They weren't even ranked. This is the first time, and granted, the playoffs have only been around for so long, but even then, this is the first time a team that was never ranked to come into the season made the college football playoffs. Like, that's a huge. So obviously they played up to expectations, but I'm really curious to see what they will do. And obviously, if Cincinnati makes noise, then that's going to completely blow up the system going forward, because then there's going to be arguments when teams go undefeated in the non-power five, which honestly isn't even really a power five in a year or two. Like I don't even think you could argue that. So I don't
I
know.
don't even know.
It's
I don't even know how it shakes out. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it'd be a bad look for Michigan necessarily, just because they haven't been there before. I mean, obviously it's a huge opportunity for them, but and I mean, maybe it would be tough for the conference, but like you said, overall that conference has had some pretty good success. Now, granted, it's pretty much only Ohio State that's done that, because I think Michigan State, I want to say, has been in before, and they got throttled by Bama a long time ago. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously, a huge opportunity for Cincinnati. I wanted them to play Bama before. I wanted them to play the Bama that didn't show up to play Georgia. Now, obviously, it's this, or the team that, or how they looked before that game. But now I don't know if I'm too excited to see them play Bama. But it's honestly gonna be really interesting because, I think there is an element of desperation as well from that Bama game. Like, obviously not to take anything away from them, but like Georgia knew they didn't need that. Georgia knew they could lose by 50 and still make the college football playoff. And obviously they still won. It's still a conference championship, still a huge game. And Bama played amazing. But there is an element of, I think, desperation that Alabama had that Georgia didn't. So I kind of still lean to Georgia being the favorites,
Well,
which seems to be a minority opinion. But
even if Georgia is the favorite, I won't even necessarily dispute that. They didn't just beat them, man.
they killed them.
they pummeled them. Like it wasn't even close. And the flip side to that is, I think Bama, it's kind of been, it's been a season, like you said, where it hasn't been as dominant maybe in previous seasons, but I don't think that necessarily reflects on their talent holistically. And if anything, this is where I have to tip my hat to Nick Saban, man. Like I just don't, even in years like this where you don't expect them to do it, they do it. And that's, say what you will about his recruiting, which is impressive in its own right. Like, because a lot of people will say, oh, they get the best guys. But so does Clemson, so does Ohio State, so does Georgia, and yet look at where those teams are. Like they're not always there. Bama, no matter what, is always there. And whether we like Bama or not, I got to give Saban credit, because I don't understand. Like if they were, I thought, I'll be honest with you, I thought they'd beat Georgia because I just thought they had more to play for, like you said. And I also think they have the talent to be on the same pace as Georgia, even if Georgia's defense is better. I think Bama's maybe a really well-rounded team. But I didn't expect them to win by that much. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think a big part of that does come down to coaching, because talent-wise, you could argue they're on a level playing field. But I think coaching, Nick Saban always has Kirby Smart's numbers. This is like Bill Belichick's old coaches playing against him. It's just it's not a good record for him. So
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it shakes out. It should be well, but the committee, they did it again. They put the games on New Year's Eve. Did you see that?
Oh, did they? Now that you say that, though, I'm not saying that's my preference, but I'm also kind of excited about the notion of like, New Year's Eve is one of those days where like up until like 9 p.m. or like 8 p.m., you don't really know what to do with yourself, especially on the East Coast. I kind of like the notion of having the games on while you're waiting for the clock to turn down. Because what are you doing in the meanwhile? You're having a drink, you're eating some dinner, you're hanging out with the fam, you're hanging out with the friends, whatever. Like watching college football. I will say this though, I got an Orioles fan, we got an Orioles fan, and we got a Mets fan here. Big talk right now is the Mets. Multiple people on the Mets, including our owner, as well as the guy we just paid $130 million to, which is probably part of the negotiations we had with them, in the sense of saying you probably get some sort of say in some of the decisions we make with managers and things of that nature, and rightfully so, because he's a veteran and a great clubhouse guy. They want ex-Orioles manager Buck Showalter. And Ev sent me a message right before this. So I was going to save it for the pod to talk about this, and was laughing at the notion of it. So I'm surprised to hear that from a Orioles fan that had Buck Showalter as their GM and had a lot of success. So I'm really curious to see what that reaction is coming from, Evan. Why you feel that way?
Well, you actually made a very timely and pertinent slip up saying GM and not manager, and I'll explain why, because that's part of the reason. But I just think specifically for the Mets. So obviously Buck did an amazing job with the Orioles, like young, a less talented team, like that got every ounce out of his players he possibly could, of guys that the more unheralded guys, not having a ton of talent, or as much talent as the teams that could pay for it, so to speak. But like it, especially towards the end of his tenure there, he's just like, for lack of a better word, he's a dinosaur. Like he is not caught up with the new age of the game from an analytics perspective. And part of the reason was because that Orioles ownership was giving him way too much power as like a general manager type, which obviously I assume you guys won't be doing, which is smart. If you keep him to the on field, then maybe that changes the game a little bit. But like, under that regime, which I think had a lot to do with Buck having too much power, there was no like international scouting department. There was no analytics. Like, it was just awful. So, and obviously that culminated in a decision to leave Zach Britton in the bullpen in Toronto because he was the closer, and you don't bring your closer into a tie game on the road, which probably cost us a wild card game. Not that team was really going anywhere anyway, but he's just kind of a dinosaur, doesn't lean into the analytics of the game. And I think with a team, in your case, that's going to have an insane amount of talent, if not the most talent in the league, other than maybe like the Dodgers. I don't know if he's the right fit, to be honest. But I mean, if your guys want him, then whatever. I guess part of it is just sit back and do nothing and let the talent take over. But
well, I was just going to say, I think Dusty Baker is your perfect example of that, because he went to the Nationals, had a ton of success there. I mean, granted, the Nationals didn't win the World Series with him, but he went to Houston, and then Houston's gotten to be pretty darn impressive in years that people didn't expect him to do much, and especially with injuries and stuff. And Dusty did really well for them. So I think that's an example. I think there's a reason Max and Cohen want Showalter. It's because of what the Mets have been for the past decade, man. Since Terry Collins was gone, and Terry Collins was an old guy or whatnot, but the last time we made the World Series was with a manager like Terry Collins. It's been dysfunction because nobody else in the clubhouse has been able to kind of keep the guys together. We tried to go get Beltran. Obviously, the whole Houston thing happened. He didn't even coach a game before he was gone. And then we go get Luis Rojas, and he looked like a really good young and up and coming thing. But the problem was he couldn't handle the clubhouse. He couldn't keep him in check. And we have a culture problem because we've always had a culture problem of like not being able to keep people at bay. I promise you, Buck Showalter is not going to have a culture problem. And that's kind of why I'm really excited about it, because like you said, we have the talent. And also, it's not just the Orioles. Everywhere Buck Showalter has been, and this is where the ties come from. The New York Yankees, when he first came to the Yankees, they were a 70-win organization. Within 2 years of him being there, they were a 90-win organization. And actually, that's why he's been tied so heavily to our job, because Billy Epler used to be the assistant GM when Buck Showalter was a coach with the Yankees. So they were already tied. And then I think Steve Cohen just came out and said he wants a manager for us that's got experience of like a lot of experience of like coaching a clubhouse team. And then the last but not least, Max Scherzer coming out and saying that. Like, I mean, Max, I tend to trust Max Scherzer because the dude's had a lot of success, and he clearly knows his managers. So I don't know.
But when did Max play for him though?
It's not about playing for him. He just knows him. Like he's been in the league for 15 years, dude. He's established enough.
That seems random to me though. Like Max Scherzer, it just like you said that, and I was like, but like, what connection does he have to Buck?
He probably.
Granted, I don't know the other candidates out there, but I don't know.
I was just gonna. The reason I say it is because the other option was Espinada, and that's the Astros bench coach was the other big name we were hearing. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure he'll be a great coach, and he's been a candidate for a lot of positions. But I'm just saying, like, almost with our team, like we have enough talent to just go out there and win. I don't think it's that complicated with our team, man. You got two aces. You run them out there when you try to keep them healthy, and then you go from there. Plus, I think people can learn from their mistakes, and I also think we're gonna have other people. He might be more willing to take directions analytically from our analytics team, which we didn't have in the past. So there's probably some sort of like middle ground they're willing to find. But I just want to talk about it since we're both fans of him. And you used to be a huge, like you were the biggest advocate for Buck Showalter. So it was just really funny for you to say that.
Until the last few years, yeah. And like I said, it's more of a fit thing almost, just because like, I mean, the thing he did great was get every ounce out of our team, which I don't know if anyone can really do that with superstars. Like, it's kind of up to the players, which I guess to your point is maybe what more of a caretaker, if you will. Exactly. But the other knock is similar to Dusty. It's like he has a good career reputation wise in terms of success, but not a great like kind of win history, and he's never really been great in the big moments. But Dusty was able to quell that though with finally getting his ring. So maybe Buck can do the same, but we'll see if it comes to pass. I don't know. Can they even do anything about it in in the
Yeah,
lockout?
you're allowed to. I think you're allowed to negotiate and sign managers because they're not players.
Right. Yeah, it's
The
all about the
lockout is
player.
players, which is why all the chatter right now is for us and the Athletics because we're the only two teams that don't have a manager in. So I mean,
That's
this was
funny.
actually a strategic decision from our team because as soon as we hired our GM, we just put all our attention on the players because we were like, we'll get a manager in the 2 to 3 month
In the
period where
lockout.
nothing else happens. We got plenty of time, so that was actually pretty smart.
I was laughing because I'm like share an office with like one of the MLB corporate offices, and like the first day of the lockout, I like got off the subway right next to a kid with an MLB backpack on that like clearly was like taking the same route to work, and I was like, what? I didn't actually say anything, but I was like, dude, man, you have to go to work today. But to your point, it's literally just the players, like that disconnect between the players and management. So all is business otherwise, but. Should we carry over to the NFL? Or you got any other topics?
No, I'm ready for the NFL.
Sweet. Let's
You
do
got
it.
a game you want to kick it off with, or you want to?
Let's see. I'll pull up the games here.
One thing to point out right off the bat, we talked Bengals last week, and I just wanted to jump right into it. This is exactly why, man. It's so hard to figure out what they're doing.
They're tricky. Yeah.
Chargers came out and stopped them. Granted, that's just as much on the Chargers being a good team as it is the Bengals maybe being inconsistent, because that was a complete game from the Chargers and in the sense of everything they put out there. But still, it wasn't very close. I mean, it was close for a little while there, and then the Chargers pulled away in fourth quarter. So that was one I definitely wanted to bring out.
It actually did really. I mean, it really tightened up. The Bengals could have caught it at one point, but the Chargers came out. They punched them in the mouth. I'll give them credit because they really needed to win that game. And maybe they've started to turn the corner back around. And I mean, to go on, like I said last week, I didn't think they'd be able to do it. To go on the road at Cincinnati, 1:00 game, impressive for them to do that. They punched him in the mouth right out of the gate. It turned into kind of a weird game there with Burrow getting hurt, although he looked okay. And the Bengals almost came back, and then the Chargers just pulled away, like you said. So, I mean, that's a massive win for the Chargers to get back on the map. The Bengals have a tricky schedule coming up. So, maybe that's the opportunity for your Colts to find a way back into the playoff picture is overtaking the Bengals with, you don't want to be losing home games down the stretch when you're nip and tuck trying to sneak in. So I don't know. I still think they're a good team, but yeah, definitely a disappointing performance from them.
Well, you say that and you hope the schedule gets easier at some point. Like, I understand we played the Texans, but after the Bills and the Buccaneers, we get the Texans a bye, and then we're back outside playing the New England Patriots and the Arizona Cardinals, who have Kyler Murray back. So it just doesn't get easier for us schedule wise. But you know what? If you're gonna win big games at the end of the year, is to do it, because if we're gonna make the playoffs, I'd rather have us make the playoffs as well conditioned, having played the best of the best, because at the end of the day, you can't make excuses about schedules. You just got to do what you got to do. But you're right, that did open the door a little bit, but it also complicated the AFC playoff picture even more, because the Steelers beat the Ravens, the Chargers beat the Bengals, the Colts mauled the Texans, and then you just have like this parity of teams because the Bills lost to the Patriots. So now the Bills they play them again in a couple weeks. So now the Bills could, if the Bills lose another game and we win, we're gonna the Bills lose next week, they'll have the same record as us, and we beat the Bills. So then the Bills would be out. You know what I mean? Like, so the AFC wildcard picture is crazy. There's a lot of teams.
No, they got the Bucks too, and the Patriots again. Otherwise, it's neat. Oh boy, you're not, because you can't even. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I mean, and again, part of this is like just picking like which teams are actually like better than the others. So like, you almost want to like count out that tier from, like, I guess it's just Cleveland now, but like the 6-6 teams, even like they're not even out of it now. Cleveland would be the only team on that 6-6 line because Vegas is just too beat up and they're not good, and then Denver's not really good either. I don't think Cleveland's that good either, but like they have the talent. You can't even totally count them out. Like you said, Pittsburgh did. It was supposed to be clean. Like Pittsburgh was supposed to lose, and then they were going to be out. Like, not mathematically, obviously, but like, probably going to be tough to get in. And then it was going to be down to the Colts and then the three teams that were currently sitting in the spots. But just keeps getting more interesting by the day. That'd be crazy if the Bills don't make it, though. And that after all this, the Chiefs could end up getting the 1 seed too. After all the
which is what I think will happen, because I think the Patriots have the harder schedule, and I think the Chiefs have already played their they're big dogs. I'm sure they have a couple of tough
They
ones
have
left.
one against the Chargers, but yeah, other than that, they got Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. So a couple semi-hard games, but games they probably win. So, yeah, we'll see. The Patriots look like the top dog, though. They're the only team that I feel like I'm like Chiefs trending that way, maybe, but like the only team I'm actually very confident in, I feel like, is the Patriots. It's like
I'm definitely
Baltimore.
confident.
Baltimore
I'm
looks
definitely
terrible.
confident in the Chiefs, but you know what's funny? I'm confident in the Chiefs for different reasons. Their defense. That's a game to talk about. They ended up 22-9 Broncos. Again, 22 is not a huge score. Broncos defense is good though, but the part that they continue to do that is really impressive to me is their defense. They, beginning of the year, their defense was struggling a ton, and I think for the second half of the season thus far, their defense has been one of the best in the NFL in terms of points allowed. So that's one thing that I'm impressed by with the Chiefs. Like I genuinely thought that if they were going to turn it around, it was going to be because their offense was going to start, putting up massive points. But it's truly been their defense, and that's like a lot of credit to them for that.
Yeah, I will say if their offense doesn't turn it around, though, I don't think it's going to be enough.
We'll see.
And if their offense does turn it around, then that's a scary team. But like, they've had basically one good offensive game in the last 2 months. That Vegas game. I can't even think of another good offensive performance they've had in like forever. And they've still been winning against, not very impressive teams, but
they beat they held the Cowboys to 9 points just 2 weeks ago and won.
Yeah, okay. Cowboys
the NFC, one of the NFC top dogs. It's just how it goes. But either way, I just want to we brought him up, so we brought him up, but we don't have to spend too much time on that. You want to flip it over to the NFC?
The biggest news, I think, was the wildcard teams losing. The Vikings with a tough loss. I shouldn't even say tough, an awful loss to Detroit at the last second. I don't know how you let that happen. And the fact that Adam Thielen got hurt. And then the Niners going to Seattle is never easy. And, Russ looks like he's kind of turned the corner a little bit, and Seattle played well, but and San Francisco should be fine, but still a tough loss for them. I think that was the biggest news of the weekend. And then Washington and the Eagles holding serve as well. So tightens that up.
So I think 49ers, Deebo Samuel is a bigger piece of that puzzle than I think maybe people give it credit for. Again, no Gamecock bias, but genuinely, when he's been on the field, that offense is scored even more. George Kittle had a massive game. Elijah Mitchell played well, but ideally you have Deebo out there with that third guy, and Garoppolo, I think his major chemistry is with Deebo and in the way they use him in so many different ways. So that Swiss Army situation they missed. But on the flip side of that, I think this is actually more the Seahawks finding their rhythm again more than it was the 49ers playing because if you told me the Seahawks were going to beat the 49ers and they were both, towards the end of the season at the beginning of the year, that wouldn't have been a crazy notion, right? Because we could have probably argued, both teams are probably really good and the Seahawks got the better of them. And that's exactly what happened. They won by one score and it was close pretty much the whole game. So I have nothing, no ill will to the 49ers for that loss, and I think they'll bounce back. Also, the 49ers are out. I think maybe their two best linebackers, so they were playing pretty beat up, and Elijah Mitchell with his broken finger somehow still playing so great is so impressive.
Well, he's a running back. Again, playing with a broken finger can't be fun, but
he's wearing a pad to cover the ball, and in the NFL, you know how much people are swinging to pop that ball out?
Hey, it can't be fun, but of all the positions to play with a broken finger, that's not the worst.
It just his ability to not fumble is really impressive to me. But shout out to Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf and the Seahawks and everybody for a little comeback spot. What the football team, man? What'd you think of that game? That was super duper close. Again, another
gotta win.
Extremely low. No, of course, a win's a win. That was so close to the end, and obviously the field goal put you guys on top, but another really low scoring game. It was
that's our model. That's how we should be winning. Like I said, it was going to be a tough game just given the how the schedule worked out. They had an extra 4 days to prepare. Both teams were beat up. We ended up not having Landon Collins and JD McKissick. And then we lose Logan Thomas towards the end of the game again. But yeah, the kicker stepped up. Kicker's first game with the squad after the Joey Sly injury. Shout out these Virginia Tech Hokie kickers coming up clutch. Was just a massive kick, obviously. But it wasn't Heineke's best game. He made a bad interception there. But again, he leads a drive down the field towards the end, gets him into field goal range, and again, that's the model. Time of possession. Antonio Gibson continues to run the ball amazing. Hopefully Landon Collins comes back this week. Like I said, Logan Thomas, it's not an ACL, but he's still probably done for the year. And just keep churning it out. They continue to be a little beat up, but now's the big one. They kind of took care of their business and won a couple tricky games, and now they get the opportunity to host Dallas and completely turn things on their head. So we'll see that happens. Like I said, hopefully, a couple big injuries. Hopefully Landon Collins comes back. Montez Sweat could play as well this week, which would be huge. And then there's a couple kind of, obviously McKissick and some of those other guys. But yeah, them and the Eagles still right there. And now it's time for division play.
The Eagles this week?
What's that?
Is it a bye week for the Eagles this week?
Yeah, the Eagles are on bye.
Yeah, so are my Colts and the Patriots. I don't understand how.
I was just gonna rant about these late bye weeks. Like, imagine being a fantasy, especially with the new schedule. Like I have Jonathan Taylor in 2 leagues. Luckily, both of those leagues are locked up from a playoff seeding perspective. But imagine if you're like a Jonathan Taylor fantasy owner and you're in a win-in, like must-win situation this week, and he's on a bye week. I would be so mad. Like I did like last week, Devontae Adams. Like, God, I hate that. Like it's so well. Plus, just from a football perspective, it's like if you're rolling right now and like you don't want the bye week, like, I mean,
players go, yeah.
But it's also like everyone's so beat up by this point that in that sense it's an advantage. So it's kind of tricky. It depends on where you are at, I guess. But yeah, crazy time for a bye week.
That get the buys in the middle of the year are so lucky because like that is a huge benefit because it's the perfect middle ground of like not just playing a ridiculous amount either towards the end of the year or towards the beginning of the year. But I would much rather have an early buy or a middle year buy than me personally. If I was a player, I would not want to buy week 14 of the year, bro. Crazy to me. I can't even fathom that. Like last year, that would have been 3 weeks before the playoffs started. Like that's crazy. I get there's an extra game, but it's also weird because like we're talking about playoffs coming up and seeding, and there's teams on bye. Like what? Like
it's bizarre. It's bizarre. It doesn't really make any sense. It's very odd. Well, because to your point, like there are pros and cons of having an early one and having a late one. I really hate the early ones unless like you come out really cold. Like Washington they had a kind of a middle one, but like when theirs came, like they were playing so bad that it was huge. But it's like one of those week 4 or week 5 buys is just ridiculous to me as well.
That's so
they should, but you also can't stack them all in the same week. So it's just kind of bizarre to see some teams on bye this late in the season. But hey, hopefully it helps them heal up and get ready for a stretch run.
So what are you thinking holistic on the NFC side? I think the Eagles winning, beating the Jets was expected even with Gardner Minshew. Obviously, with the top tier, I agree with you. I think the Cardinals and the Packers are on their own tier at the moment, especially with Kyler healthy. And, Aaron Rodgers has been so good. The Buccaneers are close, probably third. And I think I would probably put the Cowboys and Buccaneers in that next range personally. And I know that's understandable, division winners. I think holistically, the division winners, I agree with Zach in the sense of the division winners are probably more impressive in the NFC than they are in the AFC. I think the AFC is deeper in terms of teams that can make the playoffs and be competitive. However, with the NFC, it's looking like it's probably down to, I understand now the Seahawks do have a chance, but not a big one. So it's looking like it's pretty much down to those 4, right? It's
4 for 2, yeah.
4 for 2 spots?
Those, the Eagles, Washington, San Francisco, Minnesota.
And
for
the
those last 2. And then the Rams are locked in to
San Francisco, Washington, Philly, and what was the other one?
Minnesota still.
I can't believe they lost to the Lions, man.
They're in trouble. They're honestly like, I still don't think Washington has over a 50% chance to make the playoffs. But they also are higher than Minnesota right now. So I guess of the 4 teams, I think they're like second or whatever, but it's just not above 50. But I'm like losing Adam Thielen too, high ankle sprain. Like they haven't completely ruled him out, but I'm like high ankle sprain. That's usually 3 to 4 weeks or something like that. So
if y'all don't win this week, do the Eagles pass you guys?
So that puts us in a tie with the Eagles, I think.
Tie? Who has the head-to-head?
We haven't played them yet. So they have. We literally go Cowboys, Eagles, and then Giants. It's crazy.
Schedule like that makes
I know. Yeah, like it's cool to have all the division games at the end, but that's too much. Like that's too far.
I don't think it's fair to any of the teams, or not.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not unfair, but like if I was an NFL team, like why would I? That makes no sense to me, dude. Like you got to spread those out because as a fan, it's so much more exciting when you played each other and then there's like a like your revenge game the week later, a couple 4 or 5 weeks later, you play them and then 2 weeks later you play them again.
That's the crazy part. Yeah.
Like that's and it's crazier for you guys because it's not only that, but it's not like the Eagles and Cowboys have that exact situation. You're literally playing both of the teams that you need to beat to make the playoffs back to back weeks again. Like that's crazy to me. And then the Giants to round it up, which is hilarious because what if this comes down to the you versus the Giants and the Giants? Like it's a division game. Like
they'll do that, man. The Giants aren't a horrible team. They're maybe not a good team. They're not. So they're certainly not a good team, but they're maybe close to an average team. So that could be a more interesting game.
I don't think they're an average team by any stretch of the imagination. They can't throw the ball and they can run the ball, but they got a decent defense, so I'll give them that. I think they're not in a division. They're not a cakewalk for any of those teams, but they're definitely not an average team. I'm just the whole state of the AFC is so crazy to me, but I think the NFC is a little bit more like one of those four teams is going to be the two wildcard teams, whereas the AFC, the entire wild card and multiple divisions are wide open. And I will say the two big losses this week, the Ravens losing to Pittsburgh, which I mean, I understand divisional games, so I'm not going to fault the Ravens as much for that, but this is kind of goes with that argument of like the Ravens are maddeningly inconsistent in the sense of week to week, because that's a game they should have won. And in my opinion, especially given how Ben Roethlisberger's been playing recently and everything on that front, and the fact that the Steelers don't have a offensive line, and Najee Harris ran roughshod on Baltimore. So that was one thing I'll point out. And dude, first of all, shout out to the Minnesota Vikings, shout out to the Detroit Lions for winning their first game of the season. But how did the Vikings lose that game? Like I understand Cook was out, but Madison played perfectly fine. Justin Jefferson, basically was running uncovered the entire game. Dude had 200 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. I don't get it. How do you lose that game? I'm so I mean, it's also a week where DeAndre Swift is out and Jared Goff, nobody throw the football. I'm confused. I'm really confused.
I was so close to arbitrarily taking the Lions there, but again, I repeat, arbitrarily, because there was no reason that the Vikings should lose that game. When you're in a playoff hunt like that and you get the Lions, the Lions have been competitive with teams, but man, you got to take advantage of that. And that last play of the game was just how do you let Jared Goff beat you there? They were playing so soft on him. I was on the wide receiver, I was Amon-Ra St. Brown to the rescue. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh boy.
I wasn't mad about it. Shout out my boy Kirk Cousins. Not that it was his fault at all, but again, just doesn't do enough to win.
He did have a good drive at the end there. So I guess that's it for the week, man. And nothing. Yeah. That was probably the craziest outcome. I will say Patriots Bills was one that we talked about prior to this week, but I think that was understandable. I'm not actually discouraged by the Bills. I mean, the situation last night was crazy in the sense of the wind tunnel that they played in. It's like you're pointing out that Tyler Bass 80-yard pregame warm-up field goal or something like that. The wind was crazy, and that just plays to the Patriots' strength in that situation because they just ran the football. Did you see the 3rd and 5? That was one of my favorite plays that I think I've seen in years. It was a 3rd and 5, and Bill Belichick did a QB sneak with Mac Jones in the quarter. In a 3rd or 4th quarter in a 1-possession game. It was a QB sneak on a 3rd and 5. I have never seen that before, and I was only Bill Belichick would call this, and it was amazing. So,
well, I was thinking when I was looking at the spread, the spread didn't really change based on the weather, and I was I mean, that is just could you not picture a more perfect scenario for the Patriots? A team that, if they could, they'd probably just run it every play anyway if they wanted to, because they just like to bully teams. It's I mean, that's just a classic Bill Belichick kind of I feel way for him to win a game. So I was kind of surprised the spread didn't move off of Buffalo a little bit. But I wanted to see someone try a 70-yard field goal. I didn't see that warm-up thing until after the game, I think, but that was hilarious. That thing was zooming. We'll jump right into week 14 here, starting off Thursday night. The Vikings get a chance to redeem themselves at home against Pittsburgh. Line is Minnesota -3. Over under is a minuscule 43.5. Wow, that's a pretty low number. But you open us up here. What do you got? Minnesota, Pittsburgh.
Boy, this is hard.
Yeah.
This would have been way more straightforward for me before last week, but I think Minka Fitzpatrick's going to play well. Justin Jefferson just balled out. They're not going to have Cook back.
Or Thielen.
Or Thielen.
This is a hard one.
I'm going to go. I'm still going to go Minnesota. My gut's telling me Minnesota will pull it out after the loss of Detroit. I think their defensive line will get pressure on Ben and give him a little bit of trouble. And I just think they'll throw the ball like crazy. And Mattinson is a perfectly fine backup, and I think Osborne will play well for the Vikings. So I'm going to go Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm going to say Minnesota finds a way as well, just because they need it. I mean, if they lose this one, they're 5-8. You can still get in with 8 losses, I guess, but that makes it very, very difficult. So, so next one on my queue. This might just be because it bumps my my favorites to the top of the list, but we'll jump into it. Dallas and Washington. One of the big games of the week at FedEx Field, 1:00 start. Dallas is a 4-point favorite. Over under is 48. I'll make you go first again here.
I'm going to go Cowboys cover. I think they'll win by a touchdown.
All right. I am obviously biased here. I would never pick against Washington. I think that number's a little high because I actually think these teams are really evening up here down the stretch. And again, just the time of possession bully ball is a model that has worked against the Cowboys, specifically last year on Thanksgiving Day, where we beat them like 40-14 or something. So I have Washington money line. Obviously, that's biased, but I think the number's a little high. Hopefully, Washington can actually get some fans in the seats because we have low attendance, the lowest attendance in the league. So hopefully, some people show up, but that aren't Cowboys fans. But move on to another rivalry game here. We got Baltimore going to Cleveland. Big game. Cleveland's a 2.5. 2.5 point favorite. Over under is 42. Another low number there. I'll start it off. This is a hard one. Baltimore looks so bad. Cleveland's coming off a bye. I'll take Cleveland money line. They're 2.5. They're 2.5 point favorites here. So that's a low number. So I'll say Cleveland cover.
The Baltimore is a 2.5 favorite.
No, Cleveland's a favorite.
Cleveland's the favorite
at home.
All right, I'm gonna take Ravens money line.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Baker is pretty bad. Well, Lamar looks pretty bad too. So anyway, we'll move on. Jacksonville to Tennessee, Nissan Stadium. Tennessee's a 9-point favorite. Over under is 44. I'll say Titans win and do not cover.
Well, you said the Titans are a 10-point favorite.
9.
It's
at home. That's in Tennessee, Nashville.
I'm going to take Tennessee to win, but yeah, I think Jacksonville covers that spread.
Yeah. All right, we'll move along here. The Las Vegas Raiders going to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. Chiefs are 9.5 point favorites. Over unders 48. Kick us off here.
9.5 favorites, 48. I'm going to take the Chiefs to win. I'll take them to cover.
Yeah. These ads keep going off here because I'm gonna take Chiefs cover as well. Yeah, sure. We'll go ahead and move on here. Saints going to MetLife Stadium to take on the Jets. Should be a barn burner. Looks like Taysom Hill should still be playing through the finger because I guess it's not as bad as Russell's. Saints are 5-point favorites on the road. Over under is 43. I'll say Saints win and cover.
Same. Win and cover.
All right. Atlanta going to Carolina. Both teams are 5-7, so that keeps you in the playoff hunt in the NFC. Although I think both of us would agree neither of them really have a chance. Carolina's 2.5 point favorites at home. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey done for the year. Coming off a bye there, I guess, for the Panthers. Over under is 42.5. What do you got in this one?
Cam starting?
I assume. Although with how he looked last time.
Boy, this is also a hard one, man. I'm gonna go Carolina money line.
Carolina, they're 2.5-point favorites.
Oh, they're favorites. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll take them to win and cover.
All right. What did Atlanta do last? Oh, they lost to the Bucks. I'm gonna say Atlanta. This is what we need Zach for though, because it's his local team and his team. So
I feel like anything that would mar his analysis even more.
yeah, he's usually good with the Panthers, not quite as good with the Falcons. Brutal. I don't know. I'll say Falcons win on the road. Well, yeah, sure, why not? All right, we'll move on to another kind of a dud of a game. Seahawks going to Houston. Seahawks are 7.5-point favorites on the road. 41.5 is the over/under. I'll say the Seahawks kind of get it rolling here and win and cover.
Yeah, I'm with that.
All right, another blast of a game here. The Lions going on the road to Denver. Denver's 8-point favorites at home. This kicks off the 4 p.m. slate. Over-unders 42. A lot of low over-unders this week. He says the weather cools down, but
what's the line?
It's Denver -8.
Okay.
I'll say Broncos win, but do not cover.
Same.
All right. Giants going to SoFi Stadium to take on the Chargers. Chargers are 10.5-point favorites. Over-unders 44.5. Who do you got here?
Chargers win, but no cover.
Yeah, agreed. Move on to a big game. One of the big ones gets a nice little 425 slot. A couple good 425 games here. San Francisco going on the road to Cincinnati. Cincinnati is they are a 1-point favorite at home. Over-under is 48.5. Dolan made a nice point last week that Cincinnati struggles with the teams that like to come out and punch them in the mouth, which is, kind of a picture perfect definition of what San Francisco likes to do. I read today Debo actually could be back this week. Perhaps somewhat of a surprise, but or maybe that was just some over optimism from Kyle. But I'm going to say San Francisco money line here.
The other note is Elijah Mitchell got a concussion, so he's in the protocol as of Monday because he showed symptoms. So I need either him or Debo to play, and if either of those two play, then I'm in on the 49ers winning that game. If neither of those two play, then I don't feel too great about it because they're going to be nobody else has proven that they can run for him, and then you
Jeff Wilson, dude.
They've
all proven it. Jeff Wilson season, dude.
I'm saying this year that has not been the case though, right? Like
he's been hurt. He's been hurt the whole time.
No, but even
Elijah looks amazing.
No, but even when Jeff Wilson was back, Debo Samuel was getting
the handoffs.
You know what I mean? So I think the Niners will win if they have one of the two, and if they have both, then I feel even more confident in that. But I'm gonna take the Niners just because I'm gonna trust the trench style football, and I think both of them are coming off losses, but I think the Niners.
Fair enough. Move along here. Buffalo going to Raymond James Stadium to take on the Bucks. Huge game here. Not an ideal spot for the Bills, as we just talked about, kind of needing a win, otherwise falling to 7-6, and you got the defending Super Bowl champs that are playing pretty well right now. Tampa Bay is only a 3-point favorite at home. Over-under is 52.5. I'm gonna say Bucks winning cover. I actually don't hate that. I think that number is maybe a little low. Saying the teams are pretty even. Although I have another little mini rant while we have the time without a third on. I'm starting to think that 3 is like maybe kind of an old school number, and that it should actually be like closer to 2 points for the home team. Because I feel like the home away splits aren't as high as they used to be. So anyway, just something I've been hearing, and maybe a little betting nugget that's popped into my head. But anyway, it doesn't make too much of a difference. But yeah, I like the Bucks to win and cover.
I agree with you. I do think these not about the Bucks winning cover, but I agree with what you're saying about the lines in the sense of home and away, especially because different home teams have different advantages, right? Like it's different to be home for the Seahawks when they're good versus being home at, like you said, the football team without the representation. It's just different. So with that being said, oh boy. Okay, so this is another tough one for me because the Bucks have played well recently. But one thing I was thinking to myself is the Bucks have lost to the Saints. They lost to the football team. The Bills have lost to the Colts. They've lost to New England. Bucks like running the football.
This could be a hungry dog runs faster game with the Bills coming off a
However,
loss and the
my
Bucks are coming off a
concern with
big
the
win.
Bucks is their secondary is not great, and basically all the Bills want to do is throw the football. And Stephon Diggs could have himself field day. Oh boy, this is a tough one. I want the Bucks to win. I'll take the Bucks, but I'm not going to take them to cover. I don't feel confident about this one. I genuinely think the Bills could go out there and say, like, we need to win this game, and Josh Allen throws for like 400 yards and multiple touchdowns.
Sweet. Move on to Sunday Night Football. The Bears are going to Lambeau, which I get that this is always a big rivalry and always gets a primetime spot. But, man, this is such a bummer that this is Sunday Night Football with some of the other – I mean, there's not a ton of great games on this card, but, like, you know, there's some standouts that could be in this spot.
Bro, Bucks, are you kidding? We came into this year knowing the Buffalo Bills and the Buccaneers were both one seed, who were both, you know, top two teams in their divisions coming, you know, last year going to the playoffs. How is this not a Sunday night game? That makes no sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, 425 is also a great spot. I would argue that maybe the 425 is an even better. Well, it depends on people's days, but because some people go to bed and they're in the Sunday night one. But anyway, Green Bay is a 12.5-point favorite. Over under is 43.5. I'll say Green Bay wins. And I guess we don't know for sure who's playing quarterback for the Bears. So maybe I say if Fields plays, they cover. Yeah, I'll just take Green Bay to cover either way.
I'm going to take Green Bay to cover. You said 12.5?
Yeah.
I'm going to take Green Bay to cover.
Yeah. And then Monday Night Football is a very good game. Once again, we got the Rams going to Arizona to play the Cardinals. Line is Arizona -2.5. Over under is 51.5, one of the bigger ones of the weekend. I'm going to say, says these teams are pretty even. I'm going to say Arizona wins and covers.
I think Arizona, as of right now, is probably the better team, but at the same time, I think the Rams have a little bit more to prove, especially after a couple of rough ones before, a big blow up against the Jaguars. So I'm going to take the Rams actually to win this one. I think they need to. They want a little revenge after a couple of tough losses and losing the first one to the Cardinals, and I do think they're starting to look better. So
sweet, that's all she wrote.